What is your salary? I've answered this question before, but actually after seeing He Who Quacks post my answer to the question, I was like, we could get a bit more in depth on that in a way that's probably helpful for you to think about how compensation works in certain types of tech companies. So let me go over it. I'll start out with saying I am not going to tell you my salary. I'm not going to tell you my salary, but I can give you an idea of how devs are compensated, including someone like myself. So first of all, we will go to the Riot Games career website. And this is one you've probably already seen if you've seen any of He Who Quacks' clips. But if you go to the Riot Games career website and you just search up like really any type of thing, you can see the job listings. You can see the job listings over here. I am a principal designer. That is my role. And that is around the equivalent, roughly, of a senior manager in a lot of places. But a senior manager, I would say, is a more specialized role, and so it tends to be, compensated more. So if you look at, like, in California, if you have a listing of a job, you are required to give people a salary band. I want to make sure you can actually see this. Let me check. Yeah, there you go. So as an example, a senior manager, which, by the way, I'm just noting probably gets paid more than me on average, is making between around $200,000 to $275,000 a year. And what a pay band is, that's this thing here, is it's the range in which that person can be paid. And the way that they do pay bands at Riot is they kind of assess your position in the band. So as an example, when you start as a senior manager, you would be lower in the band. So you'd be making close to $200K a year. You might make the exact minimum. You'd probably make some amount more than that, but you'd be lower than in the band. And then as you get better at being a senior manager or whatever role it is, you will move up in the band. And so like when you're 80% up the band, for example, you're probably gonna be making around 250K or something like that. Or some amount. And so basically you go up the band as you get better at the relative job, right? The other thing to, so that's the senior manager thing, and like what they're paid and what a band means. Let's go back. Comparatively, Game Designer 3 is a position below me, and that makes about 142,000 to about 200,000. So anyways, the other thing to note though about this stuff is a lot of people be like, oh, so this is what someone at Riot who is a senior manager makes. Again, remember, I am a principal designer. I make some degree, I'm on a lower band than this. But there's other things that come with working at a lot of tech companies that really, really are worth it, I would say. And so one of the things you have at Riot is you have what is called, they call here incentive compensation. Here, I'm going to move this over so you can see it. Let's just write this stuff out. So what do these things mean? Okay. So incentive compensation and equity is many companies, especially in tech, I know, they're going to give you a combination of incentive bonuses and equity. What equity is you get stock of the company. So as an example, if you work at NVIDIA right now, you're probably doing pretty well because if you worked there for a while, you've got some amount of equity in that company. And by the way, NVIDIA's stock recently has gone to the moon. So there's a lot of people talking about how like folks at NVIDIA are, doing really well there, right? And so many tech companies are going to give you equity in them, and that can really, really pay off depending on how well your company does going into the future. One note about equity is that if you have equity in a non-publicly traded company, that's a lot different, okay? So equity in NVIDIA, you can sell it, right? Because it's publicly traded. Equity in a non-publicly traded, a private company, can be a bit different because you can't just go sell it. And so you might be like, well, what's the point of equity in a private company? And I'm not the most knowledgeable on this subject, but I know two things that matter there. One is if the company ever does go public, then you can sell it, right? And that's a big deal. But then additionally, a number of private companies will sometimes do like some sort of liquidity events where they like, you know, buy equity and things like that to give like their employees chances to like cash in on that stuff. So, and then the second thing is incentive compensation. And incentive compensation is kind of things like, as an example, a number of companies will do like, say, performance-based bonuses, where it's like at the end of the year, you have some bonus that is some percentage of what you normally make. And then depending on how well the company does that year, that bonus will be higher or lower, right? And so one thing to note is whenever you're looking at somebody who works at a tech company and you look at their base salary, that's going to be less than what they're actually making, because a lot of tech companies are going to give some extra percentage on top of this in incentive compensation. The catch with incentive compensation is that it is not guaranteed in the same way as a salary is, right? So as an example, if the company does really bad, they could be like, well, this year there is no bonus payout. But on the flip side, if the company does really well, they could be like, in this year, the bonus payout's really, really big. So that's something to think about. 401k, this is a retirement account. So for those of you who don't know how taxes work, when you get income, you have to pay taxes to that income. And what a 401k is, it is a tax-advantaged retirement savings account. And so basically, because of this tax advantage, the U.S. government is encouraging you to save money for when you retire. So you're you're doing well then. And so what Riot has is they have a 401k where basically I can put a percentage of my income up to a cap in a retirement account that I can't touch until I'm like, I think like 65 or something. And then Riot will match a percentage of that income that I put in. So basically when I put money in a 401k, I am saving money because I don't have to pay as much on taxes on it, but then I'm also potentially saving money because Riot's going to match some of that. Now, another advantage of a 401k is that you can invest the money in a 401k. And so 401k, not only can you can't really touch it until you're like 65, but that money can be invested and grow in savings, things like that. So there's that. And if you're wondering like, what do I mean by tax advantage with this? It's like you have two types of 401ks. You have one where you pay taxes on the money as you get it, but then anything it earns through investments, you don't pay when you take it out at 65. And then alternately, there's types of 401ks, I believe they're called Roth, where you don't pay taxes initially, but no, I think it's I think Roth you pay taxes initially. I'm getting it reversed. One type is you don't pay taxes initially, but you have to pay taxes on any extra money that was made on the investment when it comes out. And then alternately, you pay taxes initially, but then don't have to pay money on the taxes that come out. Catboy Financial. Roth is tax going in. Okay, so Roth is pay taxes going in, untaxed on the way out. And the standard one is pay taxes, don't pay tax going in, but tax on the way out. So that's the two things there. So that's a big deal. And then the last note is that like you can touch the money in a 401k, like you can withdraw it, but you have to pay tax penalties if you do. So it's like heavily incentivized to like save this until you're old. Additionally, we have medical, dental, vision, and life insurance. This is a big deal because for those of you who don't know, the United States has terrible, 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 terrible healthcare systems in regards to how people have to pay for things. And so one of the advantages of working at a company like Riot in the US is that they will take care of your health insurance, which means that if anything bad happens to me health-wise, I'm not going to be in trouble. For most countries in the world, this is pretty much free because most countries in the world like give their people health care, but that's not the case in the United States. And so this ends up being like a very, very, very big thing here. Although it's kind of troll because despite having all this, there's still a lot of medical conditions in the United States that like your insurance won't cover and you'll still be doomed. Like for me, like I have an eye disease that has costed me many, many, many dollars. And if I didn't fix it, I would have gone blind. And insurance was like, nah, you don't need to fix that. And I was like, thanks. That's great. Cool. I guess wow. So yeah, so health insurance is a big deal. And then you have short and long-term disability if things happen, and then open PTO. Open PTO at Riot basically means that like if I take a break, if I like say, be like, I'm not coming in on Friday, I can take PTO and it's going to be paid. I'll get paid as though I'd come in, and that's great. It's very nice. And you know, the standard thing about companies that do this is they usually give you a certain number of time a year. So it's like you have 2 weeks off a year or something like that. Riot you have unlimited weeks off a year. And the way these policies, and you might be like, well, how does that work? And it's like, well, the way these things kind of work is they kind of trust you, if you're working at the company, to know if like you're going to be able to get your stuff done. So obviously if you're taking unlimited PTO a year and you don't end up getting anything done, like that's a problem. But as long as like you're taking time off at like times where your teams aren't going to be impacted, things like that, like that's why they allow unlimited PTO. It's funny though, because unlimited PTO is actually a trap. And the reason it is somewhat of a trap is it turns out that when you don't have something to spend and use up, a lot of people just will never use it. And so, while unlimited PTO can somewhat seem good at face value, there's a lot of folks that will just end up not taking any PTO because they just don't have it in their minds that they got to like use up their 2 weeks. And so if you're at a company that has unlimited PTO, you need to be very, very like on top of taking time off, because it becomes very easy to not do that. So yeah, think about that one. And then other things, other perks to working at Riot is like, and many other tech companies as well, is like free food. They give us lunch and dinner, snacks, stuff like that. That's pretty cool. You know, a lot of tech companies will do that as well. There's a number of tech companies that have cafeterias. And yeah, that is kind of like an overview of the various things that go into a compensation package at a place like Riot, which is, you know, one of the reasons I often will say on stream, like Riot takes pretty good care of me in terms of compensation. And yeah, and then so like the last takeaway from this is like when you see like a salary for a job, and like especially in tech, that salary is often like the base that a lot of other things come from, like, you know, retirement savings and incentive compensation and, you know, life insurance and stuff like that. And so there can be a lot of extra stuff going into as an employee and like getting benefits, stuff like that. So yeah, that's the more extended answer to that question. What are the hours like? So the hours at Riot for me, and this is very personal, it doesn't necessarily reflect other people who've worked at Riot. They range from the standard 40 hours a week, sometimes even a bit less, to 60 hours when I'm trying to get a project out, and every once in a while, and I do mean that for me, this has been very rare. There's been a couple times in my career where I've been like, you know, a couple 80-hour weeks to like just really crunch on something. Like when TFT was coming out, that was some crunch. I will say though that it very often feels like at Riot that they don't like, a lot of companies, like one of the bad things about a lot of game companies is they'll often like straight up force you to crunch. They'll be like, you have to work forever and go insane. Riot is like very generally pretty good about encouraging people to like have a good work-life balance and take time off and things like that. But every once in a while there is something that, you know, needs to get out the door, and we do not have as much time to do it, usually due to like, you know, planning that could have gone a lot better. And so every once in a while I have had to like do like the 80-hour crunch weeks, TFT being an example, certain weeks working on Viego just because of all the bugs before he came out, stuff like that. But the standard, overwhelmingly most of the time, is closer to 40 hours, with every once in a while like a 50 or 60 hour week if I'm like, you know, trying to get something out the door or need a little extra time to do something. So you're not clocking your time, you just go and leave. So that's another thing to note between the difference between salary and non-salary, like hourly, is salary can be nice because it's like, hey, if I don't go on Friday, like, you know, I'm on salary, it doesn't really matter as much. But if you are working those really long weeks, then you know, hourly gets things like overtime and stuff like that, where a salary is just a fixed amount of pay regardless of if you're working 40 hours or 60 hours, things like that. Yeah. Yep. And then additionally, when I do work like the bigger weeks, it's not like I work on the weekends. I work on the weekends very rarely. The probably one of the exceptions was TFT, but we're really encouraged to not be there on the weekends. Yeah. So that's that.